It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm excited to be with you today. As always, I am sitting here in the Furman Garner Performance Center here at KUAF. I love spending time in this studio. I love this radio station. I'm all about public radio, but more importantly, I really enjoy the relationships that we have built since participating here at KUAF over a year and a half ago. And so really, it's just an honor to be able to record my podcast here. And I've told you that over and over again, those of you that listen on a regular basis. And so I'm excited today to bring you another new episode. And, you know, sometimes people ask, how do you find the guests that come on the podcast? And guests come in a lot of ways. Some of it is serendipity. Some of it is just somebody knows someone and says, hey, I know this person. They've got an interesting story. You need to have them on your podcast. And then I just find some people by accident. But today's guest came as a recommendation through a relationship that I have with a very good friend, Lex Broyles. His son and my son play travel soccer together, and Lex is just an all-around great guy. And he said, hey, you need to meet this guy, Brooks Ellis. He's been coaching my son in football. And he really makes a difference for young people in terms of their mindset and the training. And I said, you know, I think that would be a good idea. I'd love to have him on the podcast. We've done other episodes in the past, especially around youth sports. We had Coach Casey Dick on episode 266. We'll link to that in the show notes. We talked about his championship season with Fayetteville High School Bulldogs or Purple Dogs, depending on what you want to call them. And then we also had Brandy Harris, who is a therapist, a counselor who works with parents that are guiding their kids through the athletic process, sports process. And so how to parent your kids through team activities and team sports and, you know, not to be too overbearing with your kids. And so this episode today is going to be kind of in line with that. So if you have young kids, if you have babies at home and you are wondering and thinking about the processes of getting them involved with organized sports and what that looks like, I think those episodes as well as this episode will probably help you out. But more importantly, I just like telling really good stories. And I know that Brooks has a really great story to tell. So without further ado, I want to welcome Brooks Ellis from Brooks Ellis Coaching to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. It's great to be here.
Good. Well, man, I'm so glad to have you here. I would love for you just to kind of tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Give us your superhero origin story.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you label that superhero origin story. Yeah, so I was born in Dallas. Parents kind of bounced around a little bit when I was younger. And so my mom is from Fayetteville. So we moved to Fayetteville when I was about 8 years old. And kind of found a home here. And, you know, I just always really loved sports. I loved the competition. I loved working hard. I loved being outside, moving my body. It was just fun. And I really excelled in soccer, football, baseball, basketball. I just loved doing all of them. And so that became my muse. That was what I loved doing. And so that enjoyment continued into high school, and I kind of settled on football. And, you know, I became a linebacker, and I had a really good team when I was going through high school, and, you know, Austin Allen, Alex Brignoni, and we ended up winning 2 state championships when I was going through. We went to my sophomore year, we went to 1, and then I ended up going to 2 more and winning those 2 against Bentonville all 3 times. So that was great to finish on 2 wins. So yeah. And then after that, I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to the University of Arkansas. And played for 4 years. We had a great run with Coach Bielema. I went to 3 bowl games and just had a really, really good experience and had a really great team. And after that, I was lucky enough to be able to go to the NFL. And so I became an undrafted free agent went to the New England Patriots and spent time with them until September. I didn't spend too much time with them, but it was a really good experience. I was in the locker room with absolute legends. And so I just got to see like how they worked and how they, handled their business professionally. And it was just a completely different culture than I've ever been exposed to. And that really left a massive impact on me. Now, we can talk about that later, but there was also a lot of it that I wasn't prepared for.
Yeah.
And, coming in as an undrafted free agent with another group of 20 undrafted free agents who most likely are not going to make the team, but you're there is pretty much, they say bodies. You're just a body on the field, like probably not going to make the team, but we'll see. We'll see what you can do. And so that was a different experience. I was used to being like, one of the guys, coaches were pouring into me, and that just wasn't the case in New England. So just a different mindset that I had to go through, a different challenge that really, changed the way I prepared. I eventually was cut and eventually got picked up by the Jaguars. I did a tryout and made the team there. And that's when they went to the AFC Championship and, had a really good run with them. I was on their practice team and spent the next year on their practice team trying to make the team. And, I was a really hard worker throughout this whole period. I prided myself on being a really hard worker. But I didn't understand the power of recovery and what I needed to do to really take care of myself and handle the parts of me that were not just trying to work and work and work and work. And that really bit me the next year as I was going into training camp. And I was working out really hard, training really hard, changed my diet. I felt amazing for about a month. And then I just hit a wall and just completely I didn't feel the same. I wasn't the same person, and I was anxious, wasn't sleeping well. Performance was taking a huge toll. And so early on in a training camp in 2018, I suffered a concussion, but really it was fatigue that led to poor performance that put me in a bad situation that, going head to head against the starting center, going full speed, and that's going to lead to a bad situation for you. So that's what happened. And unfortunately, that was the end of my career. I didn't have a film that year, so they don't tell you when your career is gonna end, but that's when it did for me. So, since then, I've been on a long journey of healing myself, of changing the way I do things, and improving my relationship to God, and just trying to figure out how to get back to normal. After that concussion, I was anxious, still wasn't sleeping well, just super stressed out, hyperstimulated all the time. And throughout my childhood, I thought I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was just going to work hard. I was just going to push through it. But there's so much, this is just my, limited mindset, but I just thought you could push through it and it was going to be okay. But there's so much more to the story of being at the top level that you have to include in your training that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
And so through that healing process over the past 5 years to get to where I am now, I've learned so many things about healing the mind, body, spirit. And in order to be the best, you have to take care of those things, because that's going to make you happier too. If you're challenging yourself and pushing yourself, you're going to find happiness along that journey. But if you don't know how to supplement it with the things that really fill you up, then, it's going to be, it's not going to lead to your optimal performance, your optimal being as a person.
Yeah. It's amazing how sometimes you don't get that perspective until you've gone through some things and until you get some age behind you, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like when you're a kid, you think you know everything, but you really don't. And it's like I tell my kids, I have 3 boys at the time of recording this. I have a 19, a 17, and a 14-year-old. And of course, they all think they know way more than their pops. And that's just kind of that's just kind of the way that it is. But I'm like, man, you got to live life a little bit until you learn these things. But I also, as a parent, I have to be mindful that, my kids have to find their own way, and they have to find their truth as far as who they are. Of course, there are certain things that I'm imploring them to do, encouraging them to do, and to live a certain way and to treat others with respect and admiration and caring and just, be good human beings. But life is messy at times, and it takes you on these up and down paths that, it's not just straight line. You don't go from A to B. It's like you go from A to G to K to Z and then back again. And it's not easy. I mean, there's always something new to be had. But so, you know what, I'd love to hear from you in terms of your experience. Now that you've had a chance to reflect, were there things that you learned early on that have stayed with you to this day, right? Like, so even though you didn't necessarily treat your body in terms of the temple that it needs to be, right? Because you talked about working out and you talked about being able to recover and all that. And all I can think of is reading these stories about people like LeBron James and others and Tom Brady and still, I mean, of course, these are the guys at the top of the echelon in sports, but they learned very quickly how to take care of their bodies in order to operate at the highest level possible. And I think that's one lesson that young people more than anybody else need to learn early on, especially when they get involved with sports.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of times it's not until you go through a challenge like that becomes necessary.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, if you're talented, you're just going to rely on your talent. Like you don't know that you need to develop these other areas because your talent has taken you to where you are. And you're like, I'm good. I don't need to. Like I've been eating waffles and pancakes every morning since I've been young. Like, why do I need to change now?
Right.
But until it becomes a problem, that's when you realize like, okay, I need to do it. And then, for example, Tom Brady, like he gets to an age in which most quarterbacks are going to be falling out. And so he
and rendered ineffective.
Yes, exactly. But he learned a different diet, a different way of treating his body in which, his body was now in an anti-inflammatory state. He could handle the pressure, the long seasons, 20 years of playing in the NFL, all those hits. You can't do that unless you change your diet. And, a lot of times, I mean, like what you're saying with your sons, like you have to kind of let them experience it before they realize. But at the same time, you want to teach them, hey, these things, like you could implement these things now and it'll save you a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Along the way.
Yeah.
So,
because I would imagine that, of course, we all would love a do-over. Like in my mind, I'm 55 and I always think about, man, I wish if I could only do this over or that over, that I would just do it so differently.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, life doesn't give us, I mean, sometimes we can get certain do-overs in life, but not like that, right? I can't go back to when I was 14 or 15 back at Ben Franklin Middle School or Teaneck High School and do things differently. But, I try to impart, especially to my kids and to any of the kids that I come around, that, you have a chance right now to really change your trajectory just by making small incremental changes that can really have a tremendous payoff for you in the long run, both in your activities, so sports, but then also in life too, right? So it transcends just on the field, the playing field. It also impacts you in terms of just the way you do things in life.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think that, sports are great because, there's people you're competing, you're growing, and it's almost it is a social component of you're communicating and learning how to function in society and life in a, it's like a crucible almost, like a very high pressure, it's just all right there to learn in a very small moment. And I think one of the things that I've learned that has separated the guys that make it to the top and the guys that kind of fall off and don't have that ambition to go to the top is that realization that it's not about where you are, it's about the growth that you're experiencing and how the tools that you're learning in whatever game or practice that you're learning that day can be applied the next day. And you learning those skills, the process of learning and the desire to learn, that's what's going to take you to where you want to go. And that's the beauty of sports is that you're learning so quickly, you're learning so much. And the guys that can understand, you're never going to stop learning. Right. Tom Brady had a coach until the very end. He probably still has a coach. Yeah. Right. So it's not that you're going to finally make it one day and stop learning.
Well, and that's a good point. I was reading where, Tom Brady has a coach to help him as he has become, he has a new career as an announcer. They're paying him a crap ton of money, and which makes it a little easier. But he hired somebody to help him with that process. So the only thing that has changed is his playing field has changed. Now it's the broadcast booth.
Yep.
And he wants to be the best in that, right? I have no doubt that in 4 or 5 years, Tom Brady is going to be an amazing announcer that you're going to be like, man, Tom Brady's like John Madden or somebody like that. You know, he dissects the game and just gives it to you in such a colorful way because he is treating it like this is his new opportunity to continue to grow.
Yep.
And that's it. And the same thing with what you're doing. You have graduated, right? I love that word, right? Because it's like, it's not like, oh, well, you're out of football now. No, you graduated to the level of coaching and of molding the next generation of athletes, of people, of little Brooks Ellis's and little, I'm sure you coach young ladies too, or
no? It's just males.
Just males right now. Okay, that's fine. So
we'll get there. We'll get there. Actually, there was a young lady that came to one of our camps and she balled out. So shout out to, I forget.
Well, you know, and the reason why I asked that is because flag football has become huge.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's like all these women's flag football leagues and teams and stuff like that. So I'm sure there'll be a place for that. And there are young ladies that are playing in the SEC as a kicker. I think Missouri had a kicker.
Yeah.
That was on the football team there last year. She was a great kicker for them, actually. She could really kick the ball. But the bottom line is that you are molding these young minds now. And so you've graduated to a place where you're taking your life experiences and imparting them to this next generation and helping them to see some of the things that maybe you didn't see when you were their age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's so much. And there's like, sometimes I have to like stop and take a step back because I want to tell them so much and it's not helpful because it's like, there's so like, you have to do this and this and this, and you have to like go this hard and, you know, and you have to use your hands in this direction that like during this situation, I'm like, no, like you just have to allow them to grow in their own time and they'll pick it up.
Yeah.
They'll pick it up. And I think one of the things that I think resonates with the kids is providing the space for them to grow and to enjoy the process of growing and teaching them that it's okay to fail and it's important to fail.
Yeah.
Because that means you're trying something new. You're learning a new skill. And if there was always success, then you're probably not challenging yourself enough.
Right.
But just being patient with it and allowing them to kind of learn on their own time. Yeah. And creating the urgency too, I think is important because there's a lot of, you know, I think one of the things that really set me apart was I was extremely impatient, and still to this day I am impatient as all get out. Everybody that knows me would say this.
Welcome to the club.
But there's an element of, you know, that's one of the reasons why I got to where I was because there was no time to waste. Every single drill was the most important drill of my life, and you know it could be the last one. And I don't think I knew that at the time, but looking back. Like every single drill, I was like, it was almost like I was fighting for my life because I did not want to let anybody down. I didn't want to let my parents down or my coaches, my teammates.
Yeah.
And when you have that mindset and every drill becomes the most important drill, you're going to grow. You're going to continue to grow. But if you just go through the motions, you're never going to get to where you want to go.
Well, you said it properly earlier when you mentioned the pressure. And you said you used the word crucible. And I think of like going through a gauntlet or something like that. But what young people, I think, is important for them to recognize is that there is a certain amount of pressure that you need put on you in order to grow and to develop, right? Mm-hmm. Like a piece of coal doesn't become a diamond without thousands of years of pressure until it becomes a diamond. You can't go through, there's no such thing as a refining fire without going through something where there's just this whole idea of just, when you go through a refining fire, a period of refinement, you burn off the things that you don't need and the things that you need to amplify who you are as a person and a human being are amplified. And I think that's, you know, there is pain in that process that requires you to go through that.
It's so painful. Yeah.
You know, I listen to my son, my middle son, who's on the high school team now. And, you know, he talks about, man, we're doing conditioning now. And he almost threw up like 3 times the other day in practice. Because it's like, he said, Dad, it's so hard. You just don't understand. And he gets to the car and he's like exhausted, literally. And it's 9:00 in the morning and he's just like spent. And I'm like, dude, are you okay?
Yeah.
He's like, no, it's hard. It's really hard. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear. But to tell me this, what is your advice, especially to parents that, you've had, like, whenever you do have kids, your conversation with your kids is going to be a lot different because you've achieved at multiple levels, right? Most parents are, sometimes living vicariously through their kids. And so maybe they got cut like in high school or whatever. And so, or injured or something like that. Like, so I played college sports and so, I get it, but, not everybody gets to do that. And I think it's important for people to have some, understanding of what your child's going through, but also not to feel like you've got to continue to push them a certain way so that they become something that you in your mind envision for them, as opposed to allowing them to develop their own path in the sport that they choose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you've seen it.
Oh, yeah.
Growing up where the parents are like, get out there and do this, whatever. Like, Dad, my arm's broke. It's okay. I don't care. Just get out there and
rub some dirt on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Stop being a wimp.
What is your advice to parents around that?
I think they want to see their kids succeed, as does anybody. Any parent wants to see their kids succeed.
Yeah.
But every parent wants to see their kids succeed. And so everybody's competing for that same win, the same position on the field. And if they don't make it and that's what you valued most, what happens when that doesn't occur? And I think this goes back to like, instead of valuing success as the most important thing for, we've been training, we've been working so hard and, we really want to see you earn a scholarship or win the state championship or get the starting role, whatever it is at your level. Instead, if you reframe it as, let's see how much you can grow. Let's compete as much as possible. Let's not we're going to put pressure on you to succeed. But at the end of the day, as long as you gave your best effort, that's all that matters. That is what we value more than anything. It's not about what the end result is. And Coach Belichick would always talk about, it's more of we are process oriented. It's about the process. It doesn't matter what the end result is. It's about the process of you going through them. You go through the system of develop, grow, learn, change, adapt, continue that process over and over again. And when that becomes what you value, success may come, but it may not come in the way that you thought it was going to come. It may come in a different area of life, but if you're going through sports and your value is growth and you didn't make it to where you wanted to make it, so what? It's going to end for anybody anyways. Now you can adapt, you can adjust, go into a different area of your life in which you actually are going to be the best and use those skills that you've developed to be the best.
Yeah.
And so I know that's hard. Like, on the outside looking in, it's easy for me to, I don't have kids. So it's hard for me to say, you don't worry about the end result. At the same time, the growth, the ability to be learning skills and be challenging yourself constantly is a more important thing. So my advice would just be to reshift your perspective and not value the end result, but value the process.
Yeah, because you can't abort the process, right? It's kind of like having a baby. There's no shortcut to having a baby. You've got to go through 9 months of challenges. Yeah. As my wife told me 3 times when she had our 3 kids, that each of those 9 months was a unique challenge for her, and it posed something different that she had to overcome. And so there was no shortcut to the end result of actually having that child. Yeah. And in the same way, in our sports careers, there's no shortcut to being the best version of ourselves as an athlete.
Yeah, and that's our culture, though. Like, we want the shortcut. We want the immediate.
Well, I'm sure people call you and are like, hey, Brooks, I know you're an amazing athlete. You can whip my son into what he needs to be. And it's like, it's so much more than that. A, the kid has to be in the mindset to want to do that.
Yeah. Does he want it?
Does he want it?
Yeah.
And then B, he's got to be willing to take instruction.
Yeah. And yeah.
Because you talk about the process with Belichick. what I gathered from watching the documentary about the dynasty that was on Apple Plus, which I highly recommend that everybody watch. I think it's like 10 episodes. And the episode on, they were all really good. And I just think the dynamics that existed there in New England led them to be what I would call one of the greatest dynasties that sports will ever see. And that's hard for me to say as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, but it is the truth. And a lot of it is based on the process that Belichick was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
That, it's like, like he would say, do your job.
Do your job.
Do your job.
Yeah.
Just don't worry about anybody else. You do your job and everything else will work itself out.
Yeah.
Because again, if everybody on that team was doing their job, then the whole team is moving in concert and moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like they always say, on paper, it worked out. Well, on paper, everybody's doing their job.
Right.
And so just do your job and everything's going to be fine, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't in the locker room for this, but when they were down 28-3 against the Falcons in that Super Bowl, I think I remember Edelman talking about how in the locker room, the message was, do your job. Just do your job. Don't focus on how far behind we are.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. All we can do is do your job on this next play. And if it doesn't work out, so be it. But at least we did our job. At least you did exactly what you were supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And he made one of the most amazing catches in a Super Bowl game. And on top of that, just the mindset to come back from 28, the score was 28-3 in the Super Bowl, and to come back and win that game. I mean, it's one of the greatest comeback. It is the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history. It speaks volumes to never giving up.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's just, you just don't give up.
Yeah.
Not until the final play is done and you hear the whistle. Don't give up.
Yeah. I think, if there's a team that's going to do that, it was going to be the Patriots.
Right.
Right. Like that's and I remember watching them, and they were the team that nobody liked because they were just they were annoyingly good.
Yeah.
They were annoyingly like perfect. It's like they never messed up. It's like, it was just annoying to watch them because of how pristine their teamwork was.
Yeah.
I'm sure as a Steelers fan,
Well, it was hard because also I think too is that, Belichick did a lot with a little, in the sense that, a lot of the guys that were on the Patriots team, I mean, some of them were stars. Of course, you had your Bradys, you had your Randy Mosses and your Edelmans and your Wes Welkers and these guys. But then the average player, I mean, he would extract the most out of the average player. That's what a friend of mine told me that played with them and played with him specifically, that he just got the most out of his players.
Yeah. Well, even Edelman and Welker, they weren't anything special.
Oh yeah. And that's right? The thing. I mean, they were regular guys.
Yeah.
Like, they're not big guys. I've stood next to both of them. They're not big guys at all, but they wanted it. Mm-hmm. And they put the time and effort in. I mean, these were guys that would, on the offseason, they would just get together. I mean, Brady would famously get together with both Welker and Edelman and just throw the ball.
Oh, yeah.
Like, with regularity. So there is something to be said for that.
Yeah.
The
process.
The process. So.
Yeah. And even Randy Moss, like he was, he didn't even win a Super Bowl with them.
I know.
Right.
It's
so like
crazy.
They're probably one of their best players wasn't able to win a Super Bowl, but they had all these other Super Bowl wins with probably, less and less talented receivers.
Right.
But they got the job done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And it is, I think it's a good lesson for people to learn and understand that process and what it looks like. And just the fact that sometimes things don't end up the way you expect them to. Mm-hmm. That would have been an undefeated season had they beaten the Giants in that Super Bowl in 2007. That was it just wasn't meant to be. Mm-hmm. And so you move on. And they moved on. I mean, certainly Brady could have hung his head and been like, woe is me. Well, I got 3 Super Bowl rings, so that's enough. But he pushed on and won 4 more.
Yeah.
But because he just never gave up. He just kept going after it. And I think that's what you have to do.
Oh, yeah. Use that as motivation.
Right.
Right. Like the losses. I was I'm going to shout out a former Fayetteville Bulldog, but Callie Berna. She was a stud Fayetteville Bulldog basketball player. I think she's 2 years older than me, but she was just inducted into the FHS Hall of Greats this past Saturday. But even she was talking about how like she had like an undefeated season. She only had 5 losses in her career at Fayetteville. But those are the only games like she really cares about.
Yeah.
It's not the wins, it's the losses that really sting, that really leave a mark on you.
Yeah.
And when you look at it that way, when you use that as motivation, and when you have that mindset that, okay, we lost, but I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that as fire to develop my skills even more. Because there was something in that game that I wasn't able to do, that I didn't prepare hard enough for, that I was unaware of, that could change how we play together, that we didn't use, but by using those losses to develop your team, and I mean, that creates the greatness if you allow it to.
Yeah. Man, what advice would you give to a team and to the players on a team like Fayetteville High School, the Bulldogs, currently after a 13-0 season, right? Because I know coach has been telling them they have a target on their backs, and everybody's going to be gunning for the Bulldogs this year to beat them, because they went 13-0 last year, which was a big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
What advice would you give to some of those 15, 16, and 17-year-old kids about how they should view this season and what they are able to do on the field?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think that, it's all about complacency and not allowing that to creep in. You got to find a way to continue challenging yourself and not allow the success of last year to influence what it goes back to the process, right? Like, okay, we won the state championship last year, but how did we get there? Yeah. What was the process that allowed us to get there? It's not about that's so great that we won a state championship, but that's in the past. We can't do anything about it now. And if you allow that to influence your training and your preparation for this year, you're going to be severely disappointed. So you have to pack that up, put it aside, get ready for the next year, and prepare harder than you ever would have before. It's going to be even more challenging to do it again this year.
Yeah.
And so you got to ramp it up. You got to have leaders on the team that are not allowing those little things to creep in that are preventing your team from being the best they can be.
Yeah.
And so it's, complacency is a real thing. You can think that you've made it, and that's exactly when you don't.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's some good advice. I'll make sure that I share this with Coach Dick so he can share this with the team, because I think they need to hear that. And certainly from a fellow alumni, a fellow Purple Dog, I think that's important. So before we wind up, I'd love for you just to kind of share with our audience what you're doing with Brooks Ellis coaching and how that works in terms of meeting the needs of the athletes here locally in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah. So I started Brooks Ellis coaching officially a year ago, but I was doing some private coaching for about 2 or 3 years, just for a couple of a former teacher of mine actually had kids that I was coaching for a little bit. And then that turned into more and more. And now we have, I think since the beginning of the year, we've coached 91 kids.
Wow.
And that's all over Northwest Arkansas. Since December, we've had 5 camps. Over 300 kids have shown up in total to those camps. And so we want to provide the best coaching possible to these kids and give them extra tools to be able to become their best.
Yeah.
And to know that when you put the work in outside of the work that's done at your school or in your program, your youth league or whatever it is, that you're going to see improvement. And when you put the work in, you're going to see improvement. And it's all about that process. But what I love about my coaches is that it's an exciting group. We bring the energy. It's enthusiastic, right? We're not guys that this is all supplemental income for us. Not for me, but for my coaches. And so they're doing it mostly because, and I love it too. This is why I'm passionate about seeing the kids become not only great on the field, but great in life, and using this as a tool to transfer their skills to life and be impactful off the field and be leaders off the field. And so we try to incorporate that into our training. And so my coaches do a great job of that. And they have every single day. One of my guys, Josh Harris, he's a former linebacker at the U of A. And if you knew him, you'd be like, oh, this is the guy. He is the ultimate hype man, going crazy on all drills. Like, he is just so much fun to watch, to coach. And the kids love training with him. And so what the process looks like, we provide pretty much almost a session every day. Tuesdays and Thursdays are usually our biggest days, but it's group skill training and it's for specific positions. We're trying to diversify and provide different types of skill training.
Yep.
Along with that is fitness, it's strength and conditioning, it's speed and agility work. But then you're learning all the fundamentals: blocking, tackling, ball control, ball security, throwing. We have a quarterback coach, Jack Lindsay, and, catching, route running, all these things that, usually the coaches around here are doing a great job. We have a great system here. Football is highly valued in this area. And that's one of the reasons that I was able to get to where I got, is because of how dense the talent is in this area, which allowed me to compete and to grow and all that stuff. However, the coaches only have so much time to develop their however many kids, right? And so a lot of times the top players aren't continuing to be developed because they're pretty good. Yeah. Right. And so for a coach who has a lot of players, you're probably going to start developing the middle, the average, in the middle of the bell curve, the majority of your kids, so that they can grow. But the top guys, it's not to say they're left behind, they're not developed, but you don't need to worry about them as much. We want every athlete, no matter what their skill level is, to be able to grow, to be able to continue to develop their skills, and to know that the work is never over. There's always something to develop, no matter what it is. And maybe it's your leadership. Maybe you come in and, on top of your game, you're feeling really good, but there's some other guys in the training session that are needing some encouragement. And, we try to encourage that leadership as well, that leadership development. So just trying to provide a different experience for these kids and allow them to enjoy the sport of football. Yeah, absolutely.
And so if anybody listening to this is saying, hey, I'd love to get my kids involved, you have a website, brookselliscoaching.com. Mm-hmm. Is there another way for them to reach out and get in touch with you? Phone number, email, how else?
Yeah, so brookselliscoaching.com is a great way. Instagram at Brooks Ellis Coaching.
Okay. And we'll put all this in the show notes, folks. So you'll have this information, but I just want to make sure that anybody may be listening to this right away and it's like, listen, I got to reach out to this guy because I got to get my son in touch with Coach Ellis.
Yeah. Yeah. And just so everybody knows, we have most of our training down in Fayetteville, but we are starting to look at trainings in Bentonville, Rogers, Springdale. So we're going to start moving up north very soon. So stay tuned. Be on the lookout.
Well, and that's the nice thing about Northwest Arkansas. It's not that big that you can't go up. I mean, my son has gone up to Rogers to train into the D1 up there and gone up to Bentonville. So there are all kinds of options in terms of training. So
there's a lot of options.
Yeah, so that's exciting. Well, listen, we wish you nothing but a lot of success because, again, what you're doing is really important. You are molding not just the bodies, but the minds of the next generation of leaders. And especially as they are you're developing them on the playing field and getting them ready for life. So I really appreciate that. And I wish you nothing but continued success. And if there's anything that we can do here at the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast to help you get the word out, we'll be happy to do that. So folks, you'll be hearing more about Brooks Ellis coaching from us from time to time. And be sure to share this episode with a parent that's got a young person that's playing football or playing any organized sport for that matter, because I think there were a lot of lessons learned in this particular episode. So I think you'll find real value in it. So, but Brooks Ellis, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you and just want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. It was great to be on here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. To learn more about us or to read or download the show notes from today's episode, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. You can listen to this podcast and sign up for our free newsletter to keep up with us and all things NWA. Sign up today. You can subscribe to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast wherever you listen to it, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and please, please, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Remember, our podcast comes out every Monday, rain or shine. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here next week for another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.